Writer-director Andrew Haigh is here, from assistant film editor on such films as Gladiator, Black Hawk Down, Four Feathers, and Mona Lisa Smile, to short filmmaker-writer, to feature film writer-director-producer of the acclaimed Weekend, 45 years, and then came Looking, the TV series for HBO, and Looking, the movie, and now Lean on Pete, kind of a filmmaker's odyssey.
That sounds scary when you read all that out. God, I feel really old.
Yeah, it's like, this is your life flashing before your eyes, right? Well, this movie, like everything else that you've done, but this one particularly, it seems to radiate this deep connection for and relationship to the material. Can you speak to that? Your movies all have that, regardless of the subject matter.
I think it's just because that's how I want to make movies. I feel like for me, if I don't feel a deep connection to the material, there's almost no point making the movie. I have to really care about it on a really kind of deep level. And I remember after I read the book for Lean on Pete, and I would sit around and like talk to my partner, for example, about the character of Charlie, and it would make me cry. Like, I need to like feel it on a very personal level. I think everything I've done is like that. And I can't imagine making a film not feeling like that, because it's such a long process. I first read Lean on Pete, the book, 6 years ago. So 6 years later, I'm now...
And you've been doing things in the interim.
Exactly, all those things in between. So you need to like have a deep like connection and passion to it. Otherwise, it's just, you'd be bored to death.
Okay, I guess, well, then you've answered that. Because I was going to say your choice of material and the way in which you've been making movies now is intriguing, because 3 of your features had the backdrop of the gay community, then 45 years... which was about an elderly heterosexual couple, and now this movie with its racetrack background, focusing on the loneliness and the travails of a teenage boy searching for love and connection. So it's passion, but it also sounds like, and I don't want to psychoanalyze you here, but it sounds like it's something. The characters, in a way, maybe, and the environments and the narratives and the stories are kind of incidental to what the movie does to you personally and emotionally.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think it's like all the different... The story, to me, is the backdrop to understanding that central character. And I think I am as much Charlie as I am Kate, the Charlotte Rampling character in 45 years, as I am, numerous characters in Looking, and say Russell and Glenn in Weekend. I feel like I am those people. There's elements of what they are struggling with and trying to achieve and wanting that feel like they're versions of me in many ways. So that may make me sound like completely egomaniac or whatever, but for me, I have to find that connection in the story. And I think it's almost, I'm very interested in telling different stories, but dealing with characters that are essentially quite similar. I think you could take Charlie out of Lean on Pete and put him in Weekend. You could imagine the character in Weekend growing up and becoming Kate in 45 years. There's similarities with the kind of all of those characters.
Well, this movie, Lean on Pete, I think its strength is that it's a template film on how to use and the effectiveness of unsentimentality. It's one of those pictures where you're living it through the main character, and you think, thank God this person's resilient and seeming to weather all this stuff, because it's kind of slowly killing me here. But this is what's interesting about it. And 45 years kind of hinted at that in a different way, but this film is kind of brutal, but it's told in such a way that we can handle it. And because it is so unsentimental, the emotional climax is not only massively cathartic, but well-earned as a believable, profoundly deep cinematic moment.
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you. But it is important to me. I don't like sentimentality in films. I mean, actually, I lie. Sometimes if you know a film is going to be sentimental, I can cry as much as the next person.
Right. And at all the points that they push your buttons to do that, right?
And sometimes, you want to be completely manipulated, and you want a big musical score, and you want the moments to create something. And sometimes I love that.
Yeah.
But
has its place, right?
Has its place, absolutely. But for me, this film couldn't be like that. It needed you to kind of to not be you shouldn't even feel sentimental towards Charlie. You should feel like you want to help him, and you feel like angry sometimes and sad that you can't help him. And I think that element of almost objectivity a little bit, so you're looking in at the story. We're not Charlie in the story, we're someone looking at this poor kid dealing with such a difficult life, and I kind of like that objectivity.
And it's interesting though, because I think some people have a problem with that, because I think they would rather have their buttons pushed and told how to feel. But you have to project a lot of your own stuff on this movie in a good way, in a way that I think really good movies are supposed to do.
And you have to work a little bit.
You have to work a little bit.
And you know, there will always be people that won't like a film like this, and I'm very well aware of that. But it's like, you know, I think
what is the line? Their loss is Tiffany's gain. Whatever.
Exactly. But for those that want to I think that for me, when I watch a film where I know I have to work a bit harder at it, the payoff is so much greater.
Yes, exactly.
Because you find a way to. It's like meeting someone in real life.
Yeah.
If you don't make an effort to try and understand them, you're never going to get onto a deeper level.
Exactly. And it's an investiture. I mean, you really are, giving of yourself. But the journey that Charlie takes in this movie, you spent 3 months traveling this journey literally yourself?
Yeah, I spent some time in Portland with Willie, the writer of the book, and I went to lots of horse races and track races and match races and all that kind of thing, and met a bunch of people. And then I just went driving. It was for about 3 months. I think we drove all the way from Portland through Oregon, through Idaho, into Wyoming, through Utah, Colorado, and then I continued up through Nebraska, Dakotas, up to Montana. So I spent a good 3 or 4 months driving around, just camping, staying in motels, it's a great trip anyway. You know, my life is not like Charlie's, so it's very different. But just to get a sense of the world a little bit more. I
was going to say, how do you think it informed the final film? Obviously, it must have in some way.
Yeah, it's just the details. It's like you see little details, and also just there's a scene when he's eating in a diner later on, the Apple Peddler down in Burns, and I stayed in a motel. Oh God.
Sorry, it's okay.
My phone going off. I stayed in a hotel in Burns for a week, and I just ate every day in that diner, the Apple Peddler, and I wrote the scenes that are set there in that diner, and those kind of things just make you feel different about the environment, and that's what's so great about it. And I want to understand those environments better. And it is details like, what do they wear? What kind of mood are people in this environment?
Right. Charlie Plummer's in every scene of this movie. He sent you a letter describing why he was the ideal person to play Charlie Thompson. Can you share any of what was in that letter? And why it seems he was so aggressive, it seems, in pursuing the title. I was going to say, he's probably just a hungry young actor too, but...
I think he was there. He really wanted it, which is nice to hear when you're a director. But also, that letter, I can't remember the exact words, but he really just understood the film. He understood that this was a character who desperately was looking for safety and to feel secure and to have a home in whatever sense that meant, but just to feel like he was being cared for.
Right.
And he knew that it wasn't like a coming of age story in terms of here's a kid discovering his identity. It's not about that. It's about something even more primal than that. It's like he just needs to feel safe. And you can't do anything with your life if you don't feel that, if you don't have some kind of safety. And so he just seemed to understand that. And for a 16-year-old kid at the time I was like, that's really smart. And
it's very self-aware.
And he traveled around a lot as a kid. Charlie, the real Charlie, had done. Mm-hmm. So he knew what that felt like, going to new schools, being in new places. And so, it just really, solidified it. I mean, to be honest, even if he hadn't sent that letter, he was going to get it anyway, because he was so good in the audition.
Yeah. Can you talk about the pleasures and the perils of working with horses?
More pleasure, actually, than perils. I was nervous about it because... I don't know, you always hear such horror stories. But he was so well trained, the horse, and such a good horse that he was really good. There were difficulties certainly in some of the sequences. Some of the racing sequences were hard. There's something that Pete goes through in the story later on that was very hard to achieve. And when you don't have much money, it becomes even more tricky. You can't race horses over and over again.
Budget
you can race them once.
Yeah, right.
So we had to get it all in one shot. There's a race in Portland Downs, it's called in the story, where Charlie runs out by the track and the horses fly past him. It's all one shot, and we only had one take to do it. So it's quite a challenge when you've got one shot, one take, 200 extras. 7 horses all racing, and you need Pete to come in a certain position, and Charlie and a camera, and we had one take.
Oh boy, did you get it?
We did get it.
Obviously, you got it.
Yeah.
You know, there's something fundamentally. I'm going to share this with you because the movie made me think about this, and it actually made me think about other things too. But anyway, there's something fundamentally, I don't know, something about horse racing that makes me, I don't know if it's queasy on some deep level, but I always wondered what it did to the horse, you know, to be outfitted the way a horse needs to be, you know, the way the running itself, and the reasons why it's done in the first place. You know, it's really for like our entertainment and our sport. And I always wonder, although it could be worse, like it could be bullfighting or something, what it's doing to the horse itself. And that was always something fun. There was always something fundamentally sad about being around a race horse track. And that thing was, I think, on some level present in the journey takes when he's with Pete, and you know, he takes him across the Western United States. When he just started out, I started bawling, and I'm going, what is this? So anyway, when I was thinking about this, I'm thinking about talking to you, I thought, I think that's part of it. You know, there's something sad about that. I know people now, we're told anyway, that they take more precautions with horses because of all the animal cruelty stories we hear. But I mean, do you know about any of that stuff? Or?
I think, you know, I'm sure that some horses are looked after very, very well. I think the problem is in maybe some lower level racing. It's such a hard life for everybody. Yeah. For the people racing, for the people trying to make no money out of it. The jockeys get like $80 a race in some of these races. They're working really hard. It's so dangerous. I feel like what I learned was it was tough for all of them. It's tough for everybody. It's a very tough life. And I think you see the horses in that environment, and it's tough for them. You know, they are actually looked after really well, but it's still a tough life, you know. And especially when people aren't making much money, the races are probably raced more than they should be. You know, they're not given enough rest time. So it's very complicated. And for me, that's the thing. There's such a sadness in the story because everybody, whether it's Charlie's dad or Charlie or Dell or Pete, they're all just living difficult lives. And for me, it's about like, you have compassion. You can't help but you hope that you have compassion for these people living these lives.
The film is also beautifully shot. Danish cinematographer Magnus Nordenhoff Jonk. Is that Jonk?
That's it. Perfectly said.
Oh, great. And there's something, I know you've heard this before, but there's something emotionally aching about the images, especially the remote corners and the spaces of Charlie's journey. What kind of input do you have as a director? Did you have on this picture? There's a question here about being a DP is technical, and lenses are technical, and aspect ratios seem to be technical. But I'm curious how you saw that and how you specifically worked with your DP on specific kinds of shots, like zooms and dollies, to convey this emotion that comes up when you just look at one of the shots.
It is. We talked long and hard about it, but I sort of visualize it very early in my head, and you kind of, you know, I sat down with the DP and we talked about, because essentially you're trying to create a feeling with your camera. How can you create that feeling? You know, there is a very different feeling if you're on a dolly moving in than you are if you're on a zoom moving in. You know, we made a choice to shoot 1.85 rather than 2.35. 2.35 is probably more traditional for this kind of thing.
Yes.
But we wanted it to feel more naturalistically real, I suppose. And, you know, there's so many choices that you make, but it's like, and then on the day you set up a shot and you just have to trust your gut. I'm like, no, that doesn't feel right. I think we now need to make sure that we're zooming as we're dollying, because it creates this feeling, and it works on a kind of gut level. But it's also, for me, it's about, I like my films to feel more objective than I do subjective. And so that makes a big impact about what you do with your camera. You know, there's no point of view shots. You know, we don't show anything through Charlie's eyes. You know, we don't suddenly see something through his eyes. Right. We're standing back a little bit, or we're moving in, or however we move the camera is giving it this kind of slightly objective feeling, which to me works on a certain emotional register, but works for the film.
Well, it's an amazing movie, and all your films in various ways seem to evolve in a good way with each successive movie. So this is an incredible film. I kind of wish they maybe the distributor might have waited a little later in the end of the year so it would be fresher in people's minds, but hopefully it'll have some legs. I think
I just hope, it's one of those weird things, like I hope people see it and like it, and that's the thing for me. It's like you spend a long time trying to make a movie and get it out there, and you just hope that it's great, that it resonates,
and then you're subject to subjective
exactly
right. Okay. Andrew Haigh, writer director. The film is Lean on Pete, and if we haven't made it abundantly clear to any of you watching and or listening to us chat away here, see this movie when it opens at a theater near you. Andrew Haigh, a pleasure, sir. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
You betcha.
Great. Thanks very much. That's very nice.